In the 13th century, the largest empire in human history was established. It stretched from the Pacific Ocean to Eastern Europe, from Siberia to Persia. A nomadic people living on the steppes made this miracle happen. Their warriors had no solid rear base, no stockpiles of grain, and not even wagons to carry food. Other empires, from Rome and Persia to China, had to maintain massive logistics trains. These involved thousands of horse-drawn carts carrying supplies and tens of thousands of porters hauling goods. Yet Genghis Khan's Mongol army could travel hundreds of kilometers each day. It could fight continuously for months while maintaining astonishing combat effectiveness. So, what's the secret? How could an army without logistics conquer half the world? Today, we'll explore the Mongol Empire's one-of-a-kind logistic system. This system did not exist. It was simply completely different from anything the world had ever known. Welcome to Warrior and History. Here we tell and analyze the stories of great warriors and epic historical tales. And in today's video, let's decode the warfare mysteries of Genghis Khan's era. To understand why the Mongol army didn't need traditional logistics, we first have to understand who they were. The Mongols weren't farmers trained to become warriors. They were born warriors. From ages 3 to 4, Mongol children already knew how to ride horses. By their teens, they could shoot arrows from horseback while galloping. Their entire lives were a continuous process of military training. Each Mongol warrior didn't just have one horse. They had 3 to 5 horses that they rotated. What did this mean? European cavalry had to stop to let their horses rest. Mongol troops simply switched horses and kept riding at full speed. Their travel speed could reach 120 kilometers per day, double or even triple that of regular armies. But the most amazing thing was how they ate. A European soldier needed about 1.5 konors of dry rations per day. A Mongol warrior only needed fermented mare's milk, or airag, which served as both food and drink. A few pieces of dried meat, tucked in the saddle, and hard cheese as tough as stone could last for months without spoiling. When absolutely necessary, they would even cut a vein in their horse to drink fresh blood. This provided an instant source of protein, without having to kill the horse. Just imagine a European army of 10,000 men. It needed at least 2,000 to 3,000 horse-drawn carts to transport supplies. The Mongol army only needed horses to ride. Horses were simultaneously the means of transportation, the source of food, and the weapon of war. But how could they campaign for months with just a little food? This is the devastating strategy that Genghis Khan perfected. War feeds war. First, the Mongols were master hunters. On the march, they hunted anything edible, from rabbits and deer to even wolves. They didn't need to stop and cook elaborate meals. Quickly grilled meat over a fire, or even raw meat, would do. Herds of livestock, traveling with the army, were also a mobile food source. Sheep and goats grazed along the way. They fed themselves and became meals when needed. But the biggest food source came from the places they conquered. And this is where the Mongols were incredibly smart. When approaching a city, they sent a simple message: surrender. Hand over 10% of your wealth and food and live in peace. Resist. The city will be massacred, everything looted. Sounds brutal, maybe, clears throat, but it was an extremely effective strategic calculation. Most small cities chose to surrender. That way, the Mongol army got supplies without firing a single arrow. Cities that resisted after they fell became living examples. They made other cities fear and surrender more quickly. One devastated city could help 10 subsequent cities surrender without bloodshed. And there was one more factor: intelligence. Before entering a region, the Mongol army always sent spies ahead to gather information. Which areas had abundant food? Which cities were weak? Which routes had water sources? They never advanced into territory they didn't know beforehand. That would be suicide. Every campaign was meticulously calculated in terms of routes, timing, and potential food sources. Now let's talk about organization. An army, no matter how much food it has, will still fall apart if it doesn't know how to manage. Genghis Khan created an extremely simple but effective decimal system. 10 men might form one urban squad, 10 Arban company, 100 men, 10 Zunmon, 1 Mingan battalion, 1,000 men, 10 man, or 1 two-man division, 10,000 men. Why was this system brilliant for logistics? Each unit was highly self-sufficient. An Arban of 10 men handled finding food, caring for horses, and sharing spoils among themselves. They didn't have a separate logistics corps. Every warrior was cavalry. Every cavalryman took care of himself and his comrades. There were no support people and combat people. Everyone both fought and was self-sufficient. Discipline also played a key role. Genghis Khan's law, the Yasa, clearly stipulated, spoils of war must be shared equally by unit. No one could profit individually. If one person in an Arban fled, all 10 were executed. If one Arban fled, the entire zone was punished. This system of collective responsibility ensured everyone cared about their comrades, including in sharing food. No corruption, no personal hoarding, no officers eating their fill while soldiers went hungry and thirsty, like in many other armies of that time. But no matter how skilled, the Mongol army couldn't conquer every terrain, and they knew that very well. Look at a map of the Mongol Empire. You'll see they prioritize conquering the Eurasian steppes, grass for horses, fertile plains, rich in food, trade routes, and many wealthy cities. Areas they avoided: Southeast Asian tropical forests, where horses couldn't survive, cavalry, useless, high, treacherous mountains, which were difficult to move through, little food, and waterless deserts. Even though the Mongols were tough, they weren't suicidal. Campaign timing was also carefully calculated. Major campaigns usually began in spring, when green grass grew. Horses had abundant food, and mare's milk was most plentiful. By late autumn, when grass began to dry, Mongol troops usually withdrew to the steppes or stationed themselves in conquered regions. They rarely fought in winter unless absolutely necessary, because then horses were weak and food was scarce. For example, when Mongol troops advanced into Europe in 1241, they chose a route through the Hungarian plains, one of Europe's richest livestock-raising regions, not by chance. That was a calculation. And when news came that Genghis Khan's father, Ogada Khan, had died, they withdrew immediately, partly for political reasons, but partly because European winter was coming, not favorable for a distant campaign. Having heard all this, the Mongol army's logistics system seems perfect, but it had fatal weaknesses. First, extended sieges. The Mongol army excelled at mobile warfare, but when they had to besiege a fortified city for months, that was a problem. They didn't carry long-term food reserves. If the area around the city had been looted clean, or people had evacuated, the Mongol army would start to starve. That's why many large cities like Vienna, Constantinople, or Japanese cities survived. Second, unfavorable terrain. When encountering dense forests, swamps, or treacherous mountains where cavalry couldn't operate effectively, the Mongol army was nearly useless. The failed 1293 campaign to Java is proof. In tropical forests, there was no grass for horses. Hunting wasn't easy, and disease ran rampant. The world's strongest army had to retreat in humiliation. Third, scorched earth tactics, when the enemy proactively destroyed food supplies, burned fields, and withdrew. In 1223, when the Mongol army chased Russian and Polish forces, the enemy used this policy. Nothing to loot, no people to provide food. The Mongol army began to exhaust. Fortunately for them, few enemies had enough determination to destroy their own homes and property. But when they encountered it, that was a major challenge. And finally, distance. The farther from the mother steppe, the weaker the Mongol army became. Horses weren't accustomed to the climate. Warriors had no safe place to retreat. Supply lines were too long. The Mongol Empire was vast, not because they could go everywhere, but because they chose to go to the right places at the right times. So, there we have it, the answer. The Mongol army didn't need logistics. They just had a completely different logistics system. A system based on a nomadic lifestyle, turning every warrior into a survival expert. War feeds war philosophy, utilizing all local resources, flexible organization, iron discipline, no corruption, no waste, understanding their strengths and limitations, and only fighting battles they could win. The Mongol Empire didn't conquer the world by magic. They did it by adapting perfectly to their environment, turning what others saw as a weakness, a lack of logistics, into advantages in speed and flexibility. The lesson here is that sometimes it's not about having more that's better. It's about knowing how to effectively use what you have. That's real strength. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other interesting historical analyses. And in the comments, let me know what you think was the most important factor in the Mongol army's success. Was it the nomadic lifestyle, psychological tactics, or military organization? See you in the next video.